Welcome back, guys, or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and today I get to do a side-by-side comparison of two of the best-selling subcompact crossovers that you can currently buy for 2025. On the left, we have the Subaru Crosstrek, but specifically, this is a Sunblaze Orange Limited, which is the highest trim level currently offered on the Crosstrek. And on the right, we have the Mazda CX-30, but this one in Aero Gray is actually a Turbo Premium. So these are both very premium, very high-end trim levels of these subcompact crossovers. The Crosstrek costs around $35,000. The Mazda costs around $37,000. And there's a lot of interesting things to show you, a lot of interesting ways that these vehicles stack up, but quite a few differences that they have as well. So today, we're going to try to find out which of these subcompact crossovers might be the right one for you. Big thanks to Twin Falls Subaru for the Subaru. Big thanks to Goody Motor Mazda for the Mazda. And today, if you guys get anything out of this video, please consider liking it. Comment your thoughts and opinions below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Otherwise, let's get right into it. But before we get into the nitty-gritty differences that differentiate these two vehicles, we need to talk about what they have in common. They are the same class of vehicle overall, so they are both around 14.5 feet long, just under 6 feet wide, just under 5 feet tall. The Subaru is a little bit more of the off-roader. The Mazda is a little bit more of the on-roader, doing that in sport and style. But what do these have in common? Well, they both are by Japanese automakers. They're two of the highest rated brands while being top safety picks, while having a lot of standard safety features such as bright LED headlights, adaptive cruise control, and a lot of other things you're going to see throughout this video. Also, in the United States market where I currently am at, these vehicles are gaining ground every single year, becoming more popular, now selling over 100,000 units each every single model year, which is pretty cool. The Mazda is in its first generation that came out back around 2020. The Crosstrek came out back in 2013, but this is the third iteration of it. It came out just last year. For this year, only the premium trim level really had any upgrades. But what do these have that differentiate them? Well, they do both have the option of a 2.5-liter naturally aspirated engine, but for the Crosstrek, that's not offered on the lowest trim level like it is on the Mazda. But because this is the turbo trim level of the Mazda, it makes 250 peak horsepower, 320 pound-feet of torque on premium fuel. If you don't put premium fuel and you put regular, it's 227 horse, 310 torque. And if we want to compare apples to apples, the 2.5-liter naturally aspirated Skyactiv G engine makes more power than the naturally aspirated Subaru. It makes 191 horsepower, 186 pound-feet of torque, but this vehicle on my own 0 to 60 testing doesn't really perform better 0 to 60s than this, which makes 182 horsepower and 176 pound-feet of torque. If you do go with the base model, subtract about 30 horse and 30 torque from those numbers, but under the hood it's going to look very similar. I do think the Subaru is easier to work on. It's basically front-facing, so the serpentine belt, the alternator, the AC compressor, everything is right here. All the fluids, all the reservoirs, the fuse boxes, it's a very simple, straightforward layout. But one of the knocks that people give the Subarus are they have a CVT. I've owned a Crosstrek, an Outback, and now a Forester. The CVT doesn't bother me. I think it's a really good transmission. The only concern I have is if the CVT goes out, it's more expensive than a traditional automatic to replace. But otherwise, these are a very proven power plant, and Consumer Reports rates this as #1 in reliability. And if we come over to the Mazda, one of the things I love about Mazda is how old-fashioned they are. They still have a 6-speed automatic connected to these in the United States models, which is pretty cool. Even though this is transversely mounted, it's not longitudinally like a truck, like a real 4x4. And the all-wheel drive system is maybe not as good as the Subarus. You still have access to the computer, to the reservoirs, to the battery, to more reservoirs, to the fuse box. A lot of this stuff is still fairly straightforward, fairly easy to get to, and you can actually see the turbo right there on the back where the exhaust manifold is by the firewall, which is pretty cool. So both of these platforms are extremely reliable. The only downside to the non-turbo versions of the Mazdas is some of them have cylinder deactivation. Mazda seems to do it better than a lot of other automakers, but it still is not a method that I would prefer. Otherwise, both of these have start-stop, or at least the Subarus all do. Some of the Mazdas do. It's kind of hit or miss depending on which non-turbo trim level you actually end up with. And as we come around to the side of these vehicles, it's interesting that the Mazda kind of follows the same sporty on-road theme of lower, more aerodynamic roof rails, painted in shiny black. Meanwhile, the Crosstrek has more of a matte black finish on its raised, more rugged roof rails. And if we come down to the sides, you'll notice a lot of black plastic cladding. These colors I personally think look really good. And I think this color masks the cladding just a little bit more than some other Mazdas. I really like this aerospace gray metallic. Meanwhile, the Sun Blaze on the Crosstrek, it looks good in person on a sunny day. It really pops all the metallic flake in the paint. But you'll notice that the sporty on-road Mazda might just have a taller wall of black plastic cladding than the Crosstrek. The Crosstrek has 8.7 inches of ground clearance and a mechanical all-wheel drive system, which is symmetrical, works really good. Mazda also has a drive shaft going down the middle, and theirs doesn't seem to be quite the same as the Subaru, but in the winter testing these, they actually do very, very good. But it's interesting, with 8 inches of ground clearance, it has more black plastic cladding, but a lot of Mazda owners on my previous videos don't seem to mind that. And then these have a very similar wheel and tire. It's kind of a cheaper wheel. They usually have around 9/32 of tread, and it's a 225 55 18 on the Crosstrek, a 215 55 18 on the Mazda, which I find pretty interesting because the Mazda specifically makes about 150 pound-feet of torque more than this, but it has a thinner wheel, which is kind of funny. You can actually get these to break loose on the turbo trim levels, which is pretty fun. This is a very entertaining vehicle to drive. And then if you have a Crosstrek that's not a wilderness, it can tow 1,500 pounds. If it's a wilderness with the transmission cooler, it can do 3,500 pounds. Meanwhile, the Mazda can tow about 1,500 pounds if it's naturally aspirated, 2,000 pounds if it's a turbo like this one. And then the payload capacity winner is the Crosstrek, 900 pounds across the lineup. Meanwhile, the Mazda is about 850 pounds, which honestly, 850 to 900 is exactly where all these vehicles in the subcompact class line up. It will be interesting to see in a couple months when the hybrid Crosstreks come out if the extra weight of the battery pack and the motors takes away from the payload, potentially making the Mazda the winner, but we shall see. And we're just about to go through the cargo capacity and then we'll finish up with the interior, but it is worth mentioning that the gas tanks on these vehicles vary quite a lot. The Crosstrek is about 4 gallons bigger than the Mazda. This has a 16.6 gallon tank. It's also rated for better MPG. 27 city, 33 on the highway, and after owning a few different Subarus, I can say those numbers are pretty darn accurate. In ideal conditions, it can actually do better, which I'm sure the Mazda can as well, but this could go about 500 miles of max road trip and range in ideal conditions. Meanwhile, with only a 12.7 gallon tank and rated for 22 city, 30 on the highway, for this turbo trim level, or a little bit better if you don't go with the turbo, you're still going to be hard pressed to get even 400 miles. So quite a big difference in max road trip and range. But I do think back both of these vehicles look pretty good, especially in these colors. It is kind of interesting though how much more black plastic cladding the sporty, much better on-road handling Mazda has than the more off-road focused off-road soft-roader that the Crosstrek is. But anyways, it has the basic keys. The Subaru has the typical one. Because it has the proximity key, you can pay for the My Subaru app, have remote start, lock and unlock your vehicle, do all those cool things, even change the climate controls. But no Crosstrek has a power liftgate, so we're going to unlock that, then manually open it. Meanwhile, the Mazda has the typical Mazda key, but these do actually have a power liftgate, which is pretty cool. Back here, I think you guys will notice that the hatchbacks open to about the same height, so just keep that in mind when you are in your garage or in a low roof situation. But when you open up the Crosstrek, you have about 20 to 21 cubic feet of room behind the second row. And when you drop the seats, which for me it's fairly easy to reach over, you do have to reach pretty far though to drop them. This is the winner, about 55 cubic feet of room. They both have a temporary spare tire. The privacy shade on this can be stored underneath. And you have your scissor jack, your eye bolt hole, all the basic stuff. But 55 cubic feet of room in a subcompact crossover is actually pretty impressive. But if you need more room, you might want to look at the Forester or the Outback. And then if we come over to the Mazda, you still have about 20 cubic feet of room back here. But when you drop the seats, sometimes the headrests bump into the seats in front of them. They don't seem to lay exactly as flat as you get in the Subaru, where you can car camp in the Subaru. That's going to be a little bit harder in the Mazda, especially when the seats are all the way folded down. You only have about 45 cubic feet of room, so you're missing almost 20% of total volume. And you'll kind of notice that when we sit in the back of these vehicles too, that the Mazda, part of the sporty theme, is it is a tighter vehicle. But hey, you have a subwoofer down here, you have a temporary spare, and honestly, depending on what your needs are, if you're not going to be hauling people around and stuff too often in your Mazda, this is going to be probably the funner vehicle to drive. But it's time to finally hop into these vehicles, and out of the 32-degree weather we have currently, You will notice a lot of nice features on these turn signals. The blind spot monitoring nub right there. You also have proximity key features so you can leave the key in your pocket. And when you open up the door panel, it all opens up really good. It's a nice big approach. The seat is lower than the typical person stance, so it's pretty easy to get into it, but it's not so low of a seat like a low sports car that it's going to be hard on your knees and difficult to get out of it. The door panel on these have a variety of materials. Overall, I'd say they're pretty nice. I don't necessarily understand why Subaru has the fake carbon fiber theme, but it actually, if it's okay, it looks pretty good. Harman Kardon speakers on this one. You have Crosstrek, all-weather mats, rubberized pedals, fuse box, hood release, OBD2 port, knee airbag. Even the Limited, though, is kind of missing some buttons, which I find interesting. And then you have the turn signal. You have the leather-wrapped wheel. And then power heated seats. They are leather, they're very nice. And then a small sunroof up top. When we hop inside the Subaru, though, and we fire it up, the needles dance. You can see if we were against a wall, if it was nighttime, the headlights can turn with the steering wheel, which is a pretty cool feature. And if we go through the info button, when we close the door, you have some pretty good information in here, including tire pressure monitoring system, but it does take a second for the vehicle to warm up. The horn, it's pretty high pitched, honestly. And then voice and volume on the left, adaptive cruise on the right. You can get into your X modes. So this is much more off-road focused than the Mazda. And this can do some pretty amazing things with the all-wheel drive system, as I've tested probably about 10 videos now in the winter with these different cars. And then you have a wireless charger. These never work very well, especially in my opinion on Subarus, depending on your phone, and if you're wearing a phone case. And then you have some plugins. The backup camera, really not very good, but thankfully the trajectory lines do move. That also accesses the X mode. And then you have an electronic parking brake, heated seats, 12-volt cup holders. You have an old carryover CD tray. This console really wasn't re-engineered much for this platform compared to the last generation that used to have a CD player. And then nothing in here, but it is very big for a subcompact crossover. This is optioned with the sunroof, with the auto-dimming mirrors that have the compass and the garage door openers. And I like them a lot, but there's nowhere to put your sunglasses up here. Incandescent lighting. And with that said, let's hop into the Mazda. As we come up to the Mazda, we should notice a lot of the same features. You have the turn signal right there. It's small, but it's LED. It's very bright. You also have the blind spot monitoring, but it looks a little bit different. It's on the mirror, like the old school design. And then you have proximity key features, but there aren't any obnoxious lines really, other than maybe this little bar right here to let you know that. When you open up the door panel, it's actually really nice. A lot of good materials. The door opens, I would say, just as far as the Subaru, but look how tiny this little cute window is. It's really not that big. It's barely bigger than the length of my hand compared to this. Look at all this, way more visibility on the Crosstrek than the Mazda. I'd say the surface area is probably about 70% more than that. So when you do approach it, remember the all-weather mats are in the back. You still have rubberized pedals, even the dead pedal, which I like, the airbag. You have a couple more options than you did on the other one. You have some storage right there, memory seats even. And then again, this can open up on its own. You have the garage door. You have the hood release. You have the OBD2 port hidden away down there. Bose speakers on this one, and remember the subwoofer in the back. And then you have a nice bolstered leather seat, which is heated. You also have a heated steering wheel, paddle shifters, and another baby-sized sunroof up top. So when we hop inside the vehicle and we fire it up, I actually really like the Mazda gauges. I think they're more timeless. The steering wheel is thin. It feels really good. The horn, it's maybe a little bit more deeper than the Crosstrek, which I like. I don't know. I know a lot of you guys don't love this screen, this infotainment, but I actually like it. It's out of visibility. It's not slow and laggy like the Subarus can sometimes be, and it just works really good. You have physical controls for all of your HVAC, heated seats, heated steering wheel. You have a wireless charger. I can't imagine it works incredibly well. They just don't seem to work very well. Usually those third-party chargers that they include in these vehicles. You have cup holders in the wrong spot. It's going to bump into the dashboard if you have a really big drink. The backup camera, trajectory lines do not move, but the clarity is probably better than that of the Subaru. Electronic parking brake, sport mode and off, no off-road mode, because this is not an off-roader, even though it can probably do fairly decent with its ground clearance until you bottom out. Electronic parking brake, auto vehicle hold, volume knob, and then you can go through this. Ultimately, both vehicles do have wireless Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. That is all you need, and it works really good on the Mazda. And then this is kind of the interesting sliding armrest. When it's back, you can lift it. You maybe don't have as much cubic capacity as you do in the Crosstrek, but you have two USB Type-C plugins right there. I'm gonna leave this right here so when you hop in the back, you can see how it impedes even more legroom. And then you do actually have a sunglass holder, probably LED lights, yep. But this one doesn't have garage door openers or anything else like that. And LED light right there, which is pretty cool. Anyways, let's hop into the back of the Crosstrek. So I left the seats down. I think this will be educational for you guys, as well as how big the door panels open. Again, really nice on the Subaru. This makes it easy to get big dogs, pets in. You can also see an extra structural support right there that not every vehicle has for safety inside crash tests, which I really like. But these seats lay nearly flat on the Crosstrek, so you can get a mattress that's form fitted. You can car camp. You also have some room down here. You didn't have to move my seat forward from my driving position to get the headrest to not bump. You can always take off the headrests, but I do like that they fold down very easily. You also have all the child safety anchors on, I think, both cars, which are really nice. And sitting behind myself at 5'11", with my bum all the way back in the seat, I have pretty good knee room. You can lay that down, keep some stuff next to you, use it as an armrest. I do wish this vehicle had some vents for kids and pets and grandma in the back seat, but they don't. You just have some plugins. And then even from a seated position, I can pretty easily lift that up and show you the leather-wrapped armrest, which is sturdy enough and a pretty good height. Otherwise, visibility, it's overall pretty good in the back. I have just enough headroom, but if I lean forward, I can probably rub my head. That's just one of the downsides to this small of a vehicle. And with that said, let's hop out of this and into the Mazda. All right, this is going to be interesting. The back of the Mazda, how big do the door panels open? Very good, very similar to the Subaru. But now we have to look at this. Look at that. What the heck is going on here? There's just not a lot of room. I can force that down, but more than likely I'm going to have to move the seat forward. And when it is all the way down, you can tell there's not going to be as much room. These seats are thicker, more cushioned. Although I don't know that the comfort is any better than the Crosstrek in its ergonomic design. You still have some foot room, but you can just tell this is a big bolstered seat, more luxurious focused than practicality. Maybe a little bit less pet friendly back here too with the fancier materials. And with my bum all the way back, I barely have one digit of room in front of my knees. This is also how the sliding console lid comes back. Blocks my visibility, but there are vents. Huge win to the Mazda on the vents. Armrest. Basically the same to the Crosstrek. But look at these windows. They are not very big. It's kind of claustrophobic in here, but it's so nice. It's just comfortable. I love all these cushy materials. It feels like I'm in a Cadillac for half the price, which is pretty neat. Anyways, let's hop out and we'll wrap up this video. So while I actually lost the original ending footage to this video, I do have to say these are both great vehicles. Whether you go with one of the base models that costs around $25,000, or you go with the top tier trim levels like what I presented today, I think you can't go wrong either way. If you do live a more off-roady lifestyle, you like to travel, you like to go to the trailhead, the fishing hole, things like that, the Subaru might be the one for you. But if you mostly stay on road, if you like a sporty feel, good suspension, and even a very powerful engine, then hands down the Mazda is the winner. Either way, test drive both of them for yourself. Check out the other competition to these vehicles. You really can't go wrong either way with one of these Japanese brands. And I hope you guys got something useful out of this video. If you did, give it a big like, comment your thoughts and opinions below, subscribe if you haven't already. And then again, huge thanks to the Twinfold Subaru and Goody Motor Mazda for letting me borrow these two cool examples for the day. I'll link them below if you're interested because they sell below MSRP, they ship all over the country. And with that said, I just want to hear your thoughts down below. So see you guys next time. Bye.